scale back the features, put out a product that does, its core things really well, and it's really easy to use, and people like it. And then you add features over time slowly so that it's not overwhelming. A lot of times we get, someone comes to us, we want this device, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this, and it's going to do this. And so you've got all those things added on, and then you build that into a user interface that's, a little overwhelming for a user who's just trying to, get something installed.
Yep.
So that's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
What we're going to see, especially in the IoT space, I think we're going to see more and more devices that are interconnected, or kind of more, we're going to see more kind of interconnected systems beyond just convenience, right? So rather than just, hey, I can, talk to Google or Alexa and have something turned on or off, or, I can, pause my movie and the lights will turn on. We're going to go to a level where you're going to have, this happens, then this happens, and then, my water shuts off because, the temperature dropped below this level, and, instead of having my pipes freeze, temperature dropped below this level, my thermostat tells me that the temperature's this low, that's a freeze risk. My faucet turns on to let the water out of the lines, and I have a valve that turns off the water in my house. And now, hey, I'm not going to have a frozen pipe. Yeah. Right. Think about the value of that, right? Yeah. When you think about how much it costs to deal with what happens when you have a burst pipe, right? Yeah. Especially if you're not home. It was always different. We didn't have a typical like sit down every night kind of routine. When I was young, I remember my mom was, she was getting her master's degree. My parents were divorced when I was really young. And so I lived with my mom, and we lived on a farm, but she was working full time, and she was getting her master's degree. And so my grandma played a huge part in our life. She would pick us up from school, and sometimes we were sitting at dinner with her, and she's always been the matriarch of the family, Italian woman, all the stereotypes of an Italian woman you can think of, she had those. So sometimes it was, my sister and I with my grandma, sometimes it was typical family dinner, but it was always a little different. And then we were very active in sports and things like that. So sometimes it was, pizza in the car on the way to some event. So there wasn't a lot of routine, but we were very close as a family. And so it was always open. Like there was no topic that was, off limits. And so dinner wasn't necessarily the time for that, but a lot of times, interesting stuff would come out.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And now, have you always had an interest in technology? Were you plunking along on computers and whatnot at an early age?
Sure. So, I was kind of grew up in the era of the AOL CD, if you remember those.
Yep.
So I would try to figure out ways to get around their systems so that we could, get that free 1,000 hours, multiple times.
That's right.
So I was one of those kids, and I would, in high school, I would get on Telnet and chat room, kind of the instant messaging before there were any clients for instant messaging. You're talking to random people about random stuff, just because it was fun, right?
Yep. And, I remember those days well. Prodigy, we were always on Prodigy, and they had all kinds of different talk rooms or chat rooms and all that on there too. So that's funny.
Right. Yeah. So I was always that, like when I was even younger, it was video games. And then my mom would push me to, well, you're only allowed to do like an hour on the Nintendo, but you can do as much as you want on the educational games. Like I took advantage of that, right? Oregon Trail and Number Munchers. That's right. Whatever it was, Math Blaster, those games. Yeah. So I was always had an affinity towards it. But I grew up on a farm. And so, we had a computer, we had Apple IIe, when I was, in middle school, but, I went to Case. And that's when I really kind of got into real technology, if you will.
Yep. Yeah. So you've been a local boy all your life. You've always lived in this area. Was the farm around here?
Well, I grew up in the Columbus area.
Okay.
And then I went to Case, and I got my bachelor's there. I got a master's degree there, and then I left. Actually, I went to work at Highland Software here locally,
Yep.
right out of school, and then I left and I went to DC for a couple of years, and then we came back.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So, and what did you go to college for?
So I got a computer engineering degree,
Okay.
and early on in that, I realized I didn't want to program for a career.
Yeah.
There were things I thought would be more fun than pounding on a keyboard in a corner.
Yep.
And so that's why I got a master's degree. I actually got it's basically a technical MBA, which was my ticket away from programming, but staying in technology.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's very cool. So talk a little bit about what you do today. What types of projects do you work on? What's your main role? What do you like getting involved in?
Sure. So MGenio is my company, and we focus on mobile, cloud, and IoT development. We're a software development shop. I consider us a boutique firm, and we focus on mobile. So originally when we started, that was all we were going to do was mobile. That didn't last very long. When you first start out, you got to be a little more flexible than whatever your initial vision is. So we started with mobile. Cloud is kind of a catch-all in some sense, although we do focus on a somewhat specific area of cloud. We do serverless cloud implementations. So we only work with technologies that are not server-based. And then, IoT was a natural kind of progression. It started with, I had a guy who was interested in just using Arduinos and LEDs just to do some kind of cool stuff in the office that quickly transitioned to, hey, customer asks you a question, and the next thing you know, you're doing full implementations of IoT systems or smart home solutions and things like that.
What are some of the more unique IoT type things that you've worked on? I mean, obviously everybody knows, all the commercial ones, the Alexas and Google Home and all of that, but have you worked on any interesting projects that maybe we haven't heard of yet?
So I don't know if any that you haven't heard of. So the biggest one we've done, Moen, the faucet company, has a smart faucet that you can talk to, and you can tell it to give you 2 tablespoons of water at a set temperature, and it'll do that. And so we did all the cloud and mobile work for that solution, and that was advertised during the Super Bowl, and it was made fun of on the Daily Show, which is truly the highlight of my entire team. To have something made fun of on the Daily Show is probably the best I can do to keep my team happy, right?
Yeah.
So, but we also did a connected ceiling fan that when it comes down to it, it's just another smart home device, but it did do some cool stuff around, learning and integrating with thermostats to like kind of improve the efficiency of a house. Some of the features that people don't really think of that I think over time, IoT will start to tie systems together in ways that will increase efficiency, increase convenience, and improve our lives in different ways that we haven't really thought of, because today it's very convenience oriented.
Yep. What types of, actually, I guess, can you walk through the process of, let's say someone has some kind of an idea, what would be the steps that they would have to take to connect to their device? They would reach out to you, and what would you help them realize? Like, what types of information would they need to already have in place by the time they get to you? And just talk a little bit about that integration, that implementation process.
Sure. So it really depends, right? So because we have, since we've been doing this, we've started to develop some kind of what we call quick start code that lets us kind of start with some stuff we've built cloud side and some documentation that they can take and implement on the hardware side, so that they can quickly connect and get up and running with kind of the basic command and control type functionality, and then kind of extend it from there. We also get brought in when someone's already down the path with firmware, and so they've got the device working a certain way, and they're just getting ready to communicate out. And so then it's more of us picking up what they've got and figuring out how to make it work together. So it's pretty flexible. The big thing is a lot of people don't think about like cloud cost, and they realize that data needs to flow back and forth, and there's some kind of standard ways for that to happen, but they don't think through design around optimizing your cost structure.
Yeah.
And so we do spend a lot of time with clients kind of working through a good cloud design that will allow them to, maintain their profitability over time. Because the one thing about IoT, I think, is that the people who are building something new, and especially if they're historically a traditional manufacturer, right? None of their devices are connected. They may have the best faucet or the best ceiling fan or the best light bulb or whatever it is, but their cost model and their profit model is all based around producing that one time, right? And their cost is done, right? They don't have any maybe some support, right? Customer support is a small cost that's distributed over thousands and thousands of products. But when you have a connected device, you have that ongoing cost, right? To have the cloud available and for it to function. And so that's a place where I think we spend a lot of time designing a solution that is lower cost in the long run, and making sure that they understand what those costs look like. Because what we've seen in the market, people aren't very happy when they buy something that doesn't have a subscription fee, and then a couple years later that subscription fee is added. People get pretty upset about that. And we've seen it happen with some major companies, right? So Samsung and Wink, and these are companies that people were not too happy to see their model shift.
No, absolutely. So if someone had a product that already, I guess there's kind of two different ways to look at this. If they have a product that's already connected, how do you have any tips to know whether or not they have the most efficient model that they can have? And I guess also on the other side of that, if they are about to launch this into a connected state, is there any way to be able to estimate what those costs should be for whatever it is that they're doing?
Sure. So I'll answer your second question first. And that's, we do, for a lot of our customers, end up doing modeling based on, you have to make some assumptions, right? So things like how many times is this going to be turned on and off per day, or depending on what the device is, like what is that interaction with that device? But like for a light bulb, for example, you can kind of assume it's going to get turned on and off, 4 to 6 times a day, right? And if that's done through it, say you assume it's all 6 of those times is going to be done through a Google or Alexa kind of interaction. Well, we can model that out, right? Because we know what all the costs for each of those calls are. And I think one of the things that catches people is they're like, oh, it's like a millionth of a cent to do that, right? The challenge is that you think about it as a millionth of a cent to turn on and off that device, but when you multiply that out across hundreds of thousands of devices that they plan on selling over, say a 10-year period, all of a sudden that millionth of a cent adds up really quickly. So we do build models for our customers to try to show them what the costs are going to look like, and sometimes it's eye-opening, and sometimes there are easy ways to reduce that cost. Some of it's about thinking about what you can do on the device, or how you can minimize the up and down, right? Where, hey, I'm not sending data every second. I'm sending data once an hour, or, it really depends on the individual device, but there are simple things that can be done to store things at the edge and then, synchronize them less frequently, or to be strategic about what data you're taking up, and maybe be able to structure it so you can turn it on and off over time, where you say, hey, we thought this was going to be a really valuable feature that now nobody's using. And so there's a cost associated that we can get rid of. And so that's one way we think about it. In terms of your earlier questions of like, okay, how do you kind of plan and reduce the cost as you're building something? One way, I mentioned serverless. So for anybody who doesn't know what serverless is, I describe this fairly regularly to our customers as, the evolution of or at least how I see the evolution of the server environment is way back when you had a computer in your closet and that was your server, right? And maybe you had a dedicated line that let you keep it online all the time. But every time someone hit your site or your solution, it would go to your closet, right, and then respond. And then over time, when your closets got too small to handle that, right, you had a server in someone else's closet, basically, because you were hosting it somewhere else. And then that became, a piece of a server. We got into virtualization, and now you have a piece of a server in someone else's closet. And now with serverless, you don't even have a concept of a server, right? Now we have a service. It's, on AWS, it's a Lambda function, or, with an IoT solution, there's AWS IoT, or on Google, you have Firebase. And these are, you pay every time you use it, right? So I turn the light on, that's one call up to the cloud. I turn the light off, that's one call up to the cloud. And I'm paying a millionth of a cent for each of those calls. And so just by doing things serverless, we see savings there for people, right? Because you're not having something overpowered to handle the volume, it scales with you, right? And so that's one way to reduce cost. And then, just through good design, you can, so I guess some of that may be some of our secret sauce, and just, our experience in doing that is we've learned ways to kind of structure things so that they are less expensive over time.
Yeah, that makes great sense. That's cool. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see people kind of running into all the time? Are there some common mistakes that people are making that you can point out that might help them?
Absolutely. The biggest one, and it happens every time we get engaged on both mobile projects and IoT projects, is complexity, right? They want to add all these features, and there's a lot of value to getting something out there that's simple and works and is intuitive. And so sometimes that means scale back the features, put out a product that does, its core things really well, and it's really easy to use, and people like it. And then you add features over time slowly so that it's not overwhelming. A lot of times we get, someone comes to us, we want this device, and it's gonna do this, and it's gonna do this, and it's gonna do this, and it's gonna do this. And so you've got all those things added on, and then you build that into a user interface that's, a little overwhelming for a user who's just trying to, get something installed.
Yep.
So that's a big one.
Yeah, that's great. What do you see happening next in this space? What are some of the things that you're looking forward to? Do you have any things that you see on the horizon that people should be looking out for, or should be starting to maybe learn now?
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see, especially in the IoT space, I think we're going to see more and more devices that are interconnected, or kind of more, we're going to see more kind of interconnected systems beyond just convenience, right? So rather than just, hey, I can, talk to Google or Alexa and have something turned on or off, or, I can, pause my movie and the lights will turn on. We're going to go to a level where you're going to have, this happens, then this happens, and then, my water shuts off because, the temperature dropped below this level, and, instead of having my pipes freeze, temperature dropped below this level, my thermostat tells me that the temperature's this low, that's a freeze risk. My faucet turns on to let the water out of the lines, and I have a valve that turns off the water in my house. And now, hey, I'm not going to have a frozen pipe.
Yeah.
Right. Think about the value of that, right?
Yeah.
When you think about how much it costs to deal with what happens when you have a first pipe, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're not home. So I think we're going to see those bigger systems kind of happen. And I also think we're going to get into more preventative stuff, right? So I was talking to someone the other day about, like someone's building a house. What could be added to that process other than just, a smart, insert device? But you could have, a sensor behind the siding that tells you when water's getting back there that shouldn't be, right? Relatively low cost kind of sensor solutions that add a ton of value because they can be preventative instead of having, your footer rot out because you had water leaking behind your siding for 3 years. When it starts and you get someone out there to fix it. And then all of a sudden, we have less issues like that. And I think that's where we see things going.
Got it. What types of clients do you normally work with? What types of companies is it? I know that you mentioned startups to Fortune 100 companies, but do you have a sweet spot? A company that should be reaching out to you that you can. I mean, obviously that's kind of a loaded question, I guess, but
Sure.
I guess I'm trying to identify, if there's a listener out there that might have an IoT type project, or some type of a connected project, who should be reaching out to you, would you say?
Right. Well, anybody. I mean, that's the easy answer. But it's nuanced, right? So when we work with startups, they got to have funding, right? So we don't like work for equity, for example.
Yeah.
And so and there's lots of reasons for that, right? So we've learned over time there are lots of reasons that's not the best path for you or them, right? And so if it's a startup, they have to have funding, but we are really good at kind of creating that first product for them, that MVP, that minimum viable product. We've done it, lots of times. So it's a lot of fun for my team to get to work on something that is new and moldable. From a bigger company perspective, I think where we fit best is when they have a vision, usually a big picture vision of what they want to produce, but they don't have the in-house expertise. We're really good at coming in, being the experts in the room on the stuff that we've built, especially if it's newer technology, right? So throughout my career, prior to starting MGenio, I was always on kind of the new technology, kind of higher risk projects, and really kind of cut my teeth doing that type of work. And we've kind of embedded that into our culture here. And so we tend to find success where it is higher risk for someone. They haven't done it before. We're able to come in, deliver for them, help them kind of structure what they want to accomplish, and then hand it off if need be, or figure out a way to partner with them long term.
And that kind of gets me into the next question, is more of, on your business side of things. Obviously you started the company. How did you get started in this sort of niche category? And well, let's start there. How did you get started in this?
So, I grew up in the software consulting kind of world. So I started at Highland Software, and it was a great place to start my career. It was a fun company to work at, and my role there in their professional services team, I basically did everything from project management and requirements gathering through actual development and rolling it out. It was a very great. It was a great learning experience. To see all the different sides of how a project kind of progresses. And I kind of grew up in the consulting world, and prior to starting MGenio, I grew a technology center for a large consulting firm from 2 to over 50 here in Cleveland before kind of striking out on my own. And so that's, I just said, I'm tired of doing it for other people. I think there's a better way, like without some of the politics and bureaucracy that I experienced at a lot of the companies I worked at. And so kind of went out, and like I said, we were gonna be a mobile company. I think our first project had nothing to do with mobile because it's your first project, you just take it.
Yeah.
But over time, we tried to stay true to the kind of newer technology, interesting technologies. We like to work on cool projects. We're a culture-driven organization, and so some of that is being a little selective, and it's hard to do, especially when you're small, to say no to projects. But we try to stay true to the things we think we'll be able to do good at, where it's a customer, where there's a good fit. So we partner with our customers. I think it's one thing that makes us a little different is we think about it more than just the technology, but also the business side of it and how those two things fit together. And so as we've kind of done projects and evolved, we just found, we're doing mobile stuff, we're doing cloud stuff, and we think the future is serverless. That was really kind of as we went, we just really, this makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just started to put those together. We started tinkering just internally with connected stuff and IoT stuff. And then, that was a natural progression into IoT. We had some partnerships with some companies that do firmware and hardware. And so that was kind of how we got into some customers to do projects like that. And, the rest is history.
No, that's fantastic. That's great. So if people wanted to learn more about you, your company, what would you suggest? What would be the best way to be able to reach you guys?
Yeah, so I mean, we're not super active on social. I can be found on LinkedIn, and a company is MGenio. MGenio.com is the website, and you can reach out to me by email, jacob@mgenio.com. Always happy to have a conversation about what's going on.
I love it. This is great. This is great, Jacob. This has been fantastic. I certainly appreciate the time, and it's been interesting learning some of these things from you. So I hope that things keep progressing, and more and more interesting projects come your way. And I know that I'm always looking out for what's next, what's the next best thing. So maybe our paths will cross here one of these days on a project or two.
That would be fun.
Excellent. I appreciate it. Thanks, Jacob.
All right. Thanks for having me.